Hello everyone, thank you for joining YaYoBE.com. YaYoBE is offering SQL Server database administration and database development course. YaYoBE also offers different programming language courses like C#, VB.NET, as well as web development tools like SP.NET and MVC. We also offer HL7, that is Interface Engine course. In addition to this, YaYoBE is offering SQL Server reporting service, SQL Server integration service, and analysis service. This is the first chapter of SQL Server administration and development. You have to follow chapter by chapter, and you can have a full understanding of SQL Server development, management, and development and administration. Before we define database administration or database management system, we will see the definition and different types of databases one by one. When we come to the definition, before we see database administration, then we see data by itself, because before we define database administration, it's better to define what data is. As you can see here, data is a raw fact that doesn't give meaning by itself. It's a raw fact. It doesn't have any meaning by itself unless it is processed and be information. So when somebody asks you what data is, you can answer that data is simply a raw fact that doesn't give any meaning by itself. So data is a simple raw fact that doesn't give meaning by itself unless it is processed and converted into information. When we come to information, it is the other way, the definition. That means it's a processed data that can give meaning by itself. As you can see here, for example, you put ID number of students or name of students and sex or gender of students. If somebody asked you about this table by itself, only this table, it doesn't give any meaning by itself unless you processed and make it information. To make it information, you have to have a meaningful data. For example, if we analyze this one and say that, oh, there are 2 female students and there are 2 male students, that is information. So data is a raw fact that can be stored in a database in the form of flat file, or it can be in a hierarchical file, or it can be in a relational file, and it doesn't give any meaning by itself. When we come to information, it is a processed data that can give meaning when we use the information. When we come to management is a process that deal with or controlling things or people. That means it is a process of dealing with or controlling things or people. That means when you manage or when you control either people or any kind of resource, including data, that is management. If you do management of data, that is called data management. And when we come to database management system, there is a term, it's called system. What is a system by itself? System is a collection of interrelated components that interact one another by accepting input from the environment and displaying output to the environment. Just to make it very clear, a system can be considered as a collection of components that can interact one another. Assume that there are more than 3 or 4 or 2, more than 2 components that interact each other by accepting input from the environment, if there is input that is coming from the environment, and displaying output to the environment. That is called a system. So a system is nothing but a collection of interrelated components that can interact one another by accepting input from the environment and displaying an output to the environment. So when you come to database management system, that is a system that can accept data from the environment, so the input is data, and process that data to generate an output. That output is called information. So database management system is nothing but is a process of accepting, controlling, managing, retrieving data by first processing it. As you can see here, the input is coming from the environment. This is the input, and there are different components interacting each other. So one component is interacting one another to display an output. That output is called information. So if you see something that is, that has components interacting each other by accepting input from the environment, displaying output to the environment, is called a system. We can consider our digestive system as a system. Digestive system, we accept food as an input, and also we accept oxygen as an input, and by accepting this, we have different organs and enzymes that can coordinate one another to display an output. The output may be gross or it may be excreted. So this can be considered as a system. So a system is nothing but is a collection of components that interact each other by accepting input from the environment, displaying output to the environment. So when we come to database management system, it is a software that can accept data from the environment, process that data, and display output. That output is called information. So if you see something that has a collection of components interact each other by accepting data from the environment, displaying an output, it may be in terms of report, or it can be in terms of query, or whatever kind of output that is called database management system. So when we come to database management system, there should be a software to perform this. There should be hardware, that is the first component. There should be a software, that is the other component, that should interact one another to display an output. So the most prominent software that we can use to manage data are the following. Like the first one is Microsoft Access. This is Microsoft Access is a database management system by which you can store data into a table, and you can access this data through query, and you can form or generate a form, or you can generate a report. So Microsoft Access is one of the database management software that we can use to manage data. The other one is SQL Server. SQL Server is a Microsoft product. Right now it is SQL Server 2012. It can manage data using SQL Server by itself. So SQL Server is a software. We can use this software to store data into the computer and to retrieve it back. And there is also another, Oracle is also another one. There are many more, and we'll not go down to that depth. So just to make it summarized, there is data that is raw fact. The processed data is called information, and there is a management that is controlling of retrieval of data, and by using a software that is called the database management system. So database management system is nothing but it is a software that can handle storage, retrieval, and updating of data in a computer system. When we come to the types of databases, there are three types of databases that we can use. The first one is the flat file. We can store data in a flat file. We can store data in a flat file so that we can retrieve it back. And a flat file can be a plain text or a binary file. We can take Microsoft Word document as an example. We can store Microsoft Word document into our computer. When we store that and store another Microsoft Word document, there is no any relationship between these two files. So if we are putting files without having any relationship between in a flat manner, that is called flat file. When we come to the second one, it is hierarchical file. If we store data in a hierarchical way, that means in a parent-child relationship kind, that is called hierarchical file. That means one file is related to the other file in a parent-child relationship. One thing that you should understand in this category, that means in hierarchical database management system, the one child must have only one parent, but a parent can have multiple child. So the parent-child relationship has one-to-many relationship. So there is a must that we should have one-to-many relationship. If we need to store data that way, that is called hierarchical database management system. Where you can see this example. There is a parent. This parent has different child, and a child can have different sub-child, and this child can have one or more sub-child. If you see this kind of hierarchical relationship, that is called hierarchical database management system. The other one is relational database management system. Relational database management system, unlike hierarchical database management system, a child can have multiple parents. That means if you have a parent first, and then if you have this child, there may be another child, and this child can relate with the other child, and that is called a relational database management system. So the fundamental difference between the segments in hierarchical database tables and in relational database table is that hierarchical database system segments are implicitly joined. That means a parent-child relationship should be or must be performed in hierarchical database management system. In relational database management system, a child can talk each other. Now when we come and see the difference between these two, the first one is hierarchical. The data is stored in a parent-child relationship way. A child can have multiple parents in a relational database management system. There is only one-to-many relationship in hierarchical. Many-to-one or one-to-many relationship is possible in a relational database management system. It's suitable for simple structure, and that's hierarchical database management system is good for simple structure, but a relational database management system can be applied in an environment having different structure. Hierarchical database management system, because it has a parent-child relationship only, it is not flexible. That means a child cannot have multiple parents, and that is not flexible. But relational database management system, it is very flexible. Now, having this much about SQL Server database management system, as we saw earlier, we saw what data is. That's the first one. We saw what information is. We saw what management is, and we also saw what database management system is. We also define what a system is. Having this much about that, then we come to see how can we install SQL Server into our machine. That is the basic question. Unless you install SQL Server, you cannot deal with hierarchical database, relational database management system. Okay, now before you do anything, before you do the administration, database administration or database development, you must first install SQL Server. Before you install SQL Server, you have to identify what operating system is running in that machine. For example, you have to have first a computer. To install the software SQL Server into your computer, you have to identify what kind of operating system you are running with. So you have to identify whether it is 32-bit or 64-bit. How can we know whether our machine is 64 or 32-bit? It's very simple. First, what you should do is you have to click on Start and then go to Computer, right click on Computer, go to Properties. When you come to Properties, you can see in here, as you can see here, it says 64-bit operating system. So 64-bit operating system will say 64-bit operating system. It's simple. Go to Start. As you can see here, right click on my computer, click on Property. You will see 32 or 64-bit operating system. And once you identify that one, what you should do is you have to select 64-bit compatible SQL Server into a 64-bit computer or 32-bit into a 32-bit computer. And after you select that, just follow the installation manual from our website. It's very simple, it is very easy, and then you can install SQL Server. Okay, now once you install SQL Server, you have to go to Start, go to Program, SQL Server. You will see Management Studio and other SQL Server objects that are installed, and we'll see that in the second session. But right now we'll see what are database objects. But before we deal about database objects, what is a database? A database is a storage that you can store different objects. A database is an object by itself. It can store another object. It's a simple example. For example, take database as the storage that can store different components inside, like sacks. We can consider that one. And you can store different small things inside within that storage, and that is called a database. So in the database there are different objects, or there are different components that you can store in. The first one is tables. Tables is a collection of rows and a set of rows and columns that is used to store data. So in a database, the main component is table. It is a set of rows and columns that can store data. As we saw earlier in the previous example, to store student records like first name, last name, age, sex, all these things, we need to have first table. To retrieve data from the table, we need to have either store procedure or views, and the other one is a function. This is also another object. We'll see one by one when we deal with SQL Server. But right now, objects are representation of a real world. So objects in the database are, the database itself is an object, Tables are objects, procedures and functions are objects. Now, when we deal with a database design concept, what steps should we follow to design a database is a question that we need to answer. So before you design or before you do your database management system, you must identify problems. You have to know what you do. Otherwise, you cannot do what you wanted to do. So before you do anything, understand the problem. Understand what you are doing. After that, we can say that it's 35 to 40% of your project is done once you have a clear picture about what you are doing. Then the next one is you have to define tables. After you know you are going to do something, you can define tables. For example, if we want to do a student registration management system, what you should do is first just list out the possible tables that we need. Like student table is the first one, course table may be the other one, and then instructor table may be the other one. So define the possible tables that you need. That's the second step. The third step is identify columns. What are the columns that we need to register a student? Like first name is the first column, ID number maybe is other column, last name maybe is other column, sex maybe is other column. So you have to list out every detailed columns, list of fields within a table, and you have to specify the course information within the table. And after you identify the columns, you have to specify the data type. Actually, we will come in depth what the data type is. Data type is the type of data you're gonna store within the table. For example, for age, integer is data type for age, and for first name and last name it is a string. It's called varchar, and you have to identify in depth what are the types, and you have to specify the properties of the columns. You have to specify the properties of a column. For example, ID number may be auto increased column, so you have to specify that, and we'll see that one. And you have to also specify the key. Key means the unique identifier of a column, and we'll see that one. That is the primary key. And you have to normalize your table. Normalization means it's avoiding redundancy within a table. So as to avoid redundancy within a table, what you should do is you have to first check by inserting sample data and then remove out. For example, in this student table, if there is any repeated data, what you should do is you have to break this table into two so as to avoid redundancy. That is called a normalization. There are different normalization techniques, there are different normalization levels. We'll see that in depth. And then you have to define the relationship between tables. Once you normalize this, you have to define what is the relationship between student and course, what is the relationship between course and instructor, what is the relationship between instructor and student. You have to create that relationship, and we'll see how can we do that. Once you create a relationship, if you are doing your code, you can start writing a script. Otherwise, you can draw AR diagram. AR is entity relationship. Entity means table, a relationship between tables. You have to define that, and then you have to start coding. These are the basic steps that you should do. For now, this is the end of part 1. We'll continue part 2. There are consecutive chapters. Please follow us, and then you'll be a SQL Server a database administrator or database developer. Thank you very much for listening. This is YaYoBE.com. Yosef Adunya Kasai. Bye bye.